Good morning. Good evening. Good afternoon. And remember, Context is Everything Media Network coming to you from a lovely orange day. If you look up the climate statistics for today's day of publishing of this video, in the northeastern United States, you'll understand the orange comment. Today, I'm reading a textbook cover to cover, as usual. Starting a new section. Industrialism spreads. The idea of industrialization is a global phenomena, and between the years 1800 and 1914, it spreads from its European and American enclaves. And that's what we're going to read about. Life in the Industrial Age, Chapter 22. The Industrial Revolution spreads. 1800 to 1914, the Industrial Revolution spreads, Section 1 of Chapter 22. Cover-to-cover book, copyright 2001. Setting the scene, by 1800, steel had replaced steam as a great symbol of the Industrial Revolution. Steel girders could support stronger bridges and taller buildings. Steel rails could carry faster steel railway cars. In huge steel mills, visitors watched with awe as tons of molten metal were poured into giant mixers. Here's a quotation from J.H. Bridge in his writing, The History of the Carnegie Steel Company. Carnegie. At night, the scene is incredibly wild and beautiful. The flashing fireworks, the terrific gusts of heat and gaping, glowing mouth of the giant chest, the quivering light of the liquid iron, the roar of nearby converters combine to produce an effect on the mind that no words can translate. J.H. Bridge. The first phase of industrialization had largely been forged from iron, powered by steam engines, and driven by British textile industry. By the mid-1800s, the Industrial Revolution entered a new phase. New industrial powers emerged. New factories powered by new sources of energy used new processes to turn out new products. The new forms of business organization contributed to the rise of giant new companies. Really cool illustration later in this section. Stick around and you can see it. I'll show you before we get there. But stick around a little bit and please like and subscribe. I appreciate it. Thank you. My name is John Michael, Context is Everything Media Network, Orange Day today, June 7th in New Jersey, 2023. Look it up. Very orange. Okay. As the 20th century dawned, this second industrial revolution transformed the economies of the Western world. Let's think about these giant new companies. I think they're called monopolies. New industrial powers. During the early Industrial Revolution, Britain stood alone as the world's industrial giant. There's a new heading. During the early Industrial Revolution, Britain stood alone as the world's industrial giant. To protect its head start, Britain tried to enforce strict rules against exporting inventions. For a while, the rules worked. Then, in 1807, British mechanic William Cockerill opened factories in Belgium to manufacture spinning and weaving machines. Belgium became the first European nation outside of Britain to industrialize. By the mid-1800s, other nations had joined the race, and several newcomers were challenging Britain's industrial supremacy. New pace setters. How were other nations able to catch up to Britain so quickly? First, nations such as Germany, France, and the United States had more abundant supplies of coal, iron, and other resources than Britain had. Also, they had the advantage of being able to follow Britain's lead. Like Belgium, Latecomers often borrowed British experts or technology. First, American textile factories were built in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, with plans smuggled out of Britain. American inventor Robert Fulton powered his steamboat with one of James Watt's engines. Two countries in particular thrust their way into the industrial leadership. Germany united into a powerful nation in 1871. We'll discuss that more later. Within a few decades, it became Europe's leading industrial power. Across the Atlantic, the United States advanced even more rapidly, especially after the Civil War, which we have not gotten to yet in this textbook. By 1900, American industry led the world in production. Uneven development. Other nations industrialized more slowly, particularly those in the Eastern and Southern Europe. These nations often lacked natural resources or the capital to invest in industry. Although Russians did have resources, social and political conditions slowed its economic development. Only in the late 1800s, more than 100 years after Britain, did Russia lumber towards industrialization. In East Asia, however, Japan offered a remarkable success story. Although it lacked many basic resources, it industrialized rapidly after 1868. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand also built thriving industries. Canada. Impact. Like Britain, the new industrial nations underwent social change, such as rapid urbanization. Men, women, and children worked long hours in difficult and dangerous conditions. As you will read, by 1900, these conditions had begun to improve. In many industrialized nations, the factory system produced huge quantities of new goods at lower prices than ever before. In time, workers were buying goods that in earlier times only the wealthy could afford. The demand for goods created jobs, as did the building of cities, railroads, and factories. Politics changed too. The leaders had to meet the demands of the industrial society. Globally, industrial nations competed fiercely, altering patterns of the world's trade. Thanks to their technological economic advantages, Western powers came to dominate the world more than ever before. As you will read, as I will read, as you will hear. And I only make that distinction because I've read a lot of audiobooks in my day, and I get a lot of heat for saying that I've read audiobooks, because I've listened to them. So when the book says, as you will read, I say, well, technically I'm reading it and you're listening. And thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. I look at the YouTube app compulsively. It is a compulsion of mine to look at the YouTube app. And it's kind of nice when I get another subscriber, because I'm like, okay, I'm reading to another person. Potentially. Every day. What a beautiful orange day it is. So strange. New heading. Technology and industry. No glasses. New heading. During the early Industrial Revolution, inventions such as the steam engine were generally the work of gifted tinkerers. They experimented with simple machines to make them better. By the 1800s, the pace had changed quickly. The pace of change quickened as companies hired professional chemists and engineers to create new products and machinery. The marriage of science and technology and industry spurred economic growth. Steel. In 1856, British engineer Henry Bessemer, Bessemer, developed a process to purify iron ore and produce a new substance, steel. Steel was lighter, harder, and more durable than iron. Others improved on Bessemer's process, so steel could be produced very cheaply. It rapidly became the major material used in tools, bridges, and railroads. As steel production soared, industrialized countries measure their success in steel output. In 1880, for example, the average German steel mill produced less than 5 million metric tons a year. By 1910, however, that figure had reached nearly 15 million metric tons per year, I think. Right? Chemicals. Chemists created hundreds of new products. From medicines such as aspirin to perfumes and soaps, newly developed chemical fertilizers played a key role in increasing food production. In 1866, the Swedish chemist Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, an explosive that would be much safer than others used at that time. Safer, wow. It was widely used in construction, and to Nobel's dismay, in warfare. He only thought it was going to be used in construction or destruction for the sake of construction, whatever. Dynamite earned Nobel a huge fortune. Is it Nobel? It's Nobel. This man's name is Nobel. Nobel Prize is named after the guy who made dynamite? That's counter-logical. Dynamite earned Nobel a huge fortune, which he willed to fund a famous Nobel Prize fund that still is awarded today. Electricity. In the late 1800s, a new power source, electricity, replaced steam as the dominant source of industrial power. Scientists like Benjamin Franklin had tinkered with electricity a century earlier. The Italian scientist Alessandro Volta developed the first battery about 1800. Later, the English chemist Michael Faraday created the first simple electric motor, and the first dynamo, a machine that generates electricity. Today, all electrical generators and transformers work on the principles of Faraday's dynamo. The heck is the dynamo? Show me a picture. I'm curious. In the 1870s, the American inventor Thomas Edison made the first electric light bulb. Soon, Edison's incandescent lamps illuminated whole cities. The pace of city life quickened, and factories could continue operate after dark. By the 1890s, cables carried electrical power from dynamos to factories. New methods of production. The basic features of the factory system remained the same during the 1800s. Factories still used large numbers of workers to power-driven machines to mass-produce goods. To improve efficiency, however, manufacturers designed products with interchangeable parts, identical components that could be used in place of one another. Interchangeable parts simplified both assembly and repair. By the early 1900s, manufacturers introduced another new method of production, the assembly line. Workers on an assembly line add parts to a product that moves along a belt from one workstation to the next. Like interchangeable parts, the assembly line made production faster, cheaper, and lowered the price of goods. New heading. Technology speeds transportation and communication. This is a long section, by the way. I think we probably are about halfway through. About a half hour today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your consideration to like and subscribe. And thank you. I hope you're enjoying your orange day. During the Second Industrial Revolution, transportation and communications were transformed by technology. Steamships replaced sailing ships. The railroad building took off. In Europe and North America, rail lines connected inland cities and seaports, mining regions, and industrial centers. In the United States, Transcontinental Railroad provided rail service from the Atlantic to the Pacific. In the same way, Russians built a Trans-Siberian Railroad linking Moscow to European Russia, to Vladivostok in the Pacific. Railroad tunnels and bridges crossed the Alps in Europe and the Andes in South America. Passengers and goods rode rails in India, China, and Egypt, and South Africa. The automobile age begins. The transportation revolution took new turn when the German engineer Nikolaus Otto, O-T-T-O, invented a gasoline-powered internal combustion engine. In 1866, Carl Benz received a patent for the first automobile, which had 3 wheels. No pictures of that one. A year later, Gottlieb Daimler introduced the first 4-wheeled automobile. People laughed at the horseless carriages, which quickly transformed transportation. The French nosed out the Germans as early automakers. Then the American Henry Ford started making models that reached the breathtaking speed of, you guessed it, 25 miles an hour. In the early 1900s, Ford began using an assembly line to mass-produce cars, making the United States a leader in the automobile industry. Are we still? Maybe. Conquest of the air. The internal combustion engine powered more than cars. Motorized threshers and reapers boosted farm production. Even more dramatically, the internal combustion engine made possible the dream of human flight. Yeah, that's right. In 1903, 2 American bicycle makers, Orville and Wilbur Wright, designed and flew a flimsy airplane at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Although their flying machine stayed aloft for only a few seconds, it ushered in the air age. The air age. The air age. I like the way that sounds, because it sounds kind of silly. The air age. Soon, daredevil pilots were flying airplanes across the English Channel and over the Alps. Commercial passenger travel, however, would not begin until the 1920s. Rapid communication. A revolution in communications also made the world smaller. An American investor, Samuel F.B. Morse, developed the telegraph, which could send coded messages over wires by means of electricity. His first telegraph line went into service between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. in 1844. By the 1860s, an undersea cable was rallying messages between Europe and North America. It's a long cable. Communication soon became even faster. In 1876, the Scottish-born American inventor Alexander Graham Bell patented the telephone. By the 1890s, Italian pioneer, and don't you forget it, Guglielmo Marconi had invented the radio. In 1901, Marconi transmitted the radio message from Britain to Canada using Morse is dot and dash code. Morse's dot and dash code, Morse code. Radio would become a cornerstone of today's global communication network that links every corner of the world. Let me show you this picture that I told you I was going to show you. Interesting picture about monopolies. I find it kind of shocking and pretty captivating. Talking about how monopolies take over cities and take over society. This monopoly has its tentacles in everything, because it owns and runs everything, because it has all of the power and all of the capital and all of the resources to do everything. And they all bring money into the same place, to this guy. And this guy seems like a good man. To me, he seems like a nice guy. Seems like a nice guy. Okay. To me, he seems like a nice guy. What do you want? New directions for business. New heading. And we're almost there, actually. Probably going to be done in about 6 minutes. New technologies require the investment of large amounts of money. To get the needed capital, entrepreneurs developed new ways of organizing businesses. Owners sold stock or shares in their companies to investors. Each stockholder thus became an owner of a tiny part of the company. Rise of big business. Inevitable. By the 1800s, what we call big business came to dominate industry. Large-scale companies such as steel foundries needed so much capital that they sold hundreds of thousands of shares. These businesses formed giant corporations, businesses that are owned by many investors who buy shares of stocks. Stockholders risk only the amount they invest in the company and cannot be held personally responsible for any debts of the corporation. With large amounts of capital, corporations could expand into many areas. In the novel Germinal, Germinal, by the French writer Émile Zola, two investors discussed the growth of a large coal mining company. And is your company rich? One asks. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. The other replies. Here's another quote from that book from Émile Zola. 10,000 workers, concessions reaching over 67 towns, an output of 5,000 tons a day, a railway joining all pits and workshops and factories. Ah, yes, there's money there. Émile Zola in Germinal. Move towards monopolies. What a lovely orange day it is. What a lovely orange day it is. June 7th, 2023. Look up the climate statistics in the northeastern United States, because it is orange today. And that's not normal. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong. It's possible. I've been wrong before. Plenty of times. Move towards monopolies. Powerful businesses leaders created monopolies and trusts. Huge corporations, structures that controlled entire industries and areas of the economy. Sounds good, right? A win-win-win. In Germany, Alfred Krupp inherited the steel making business from his father. He brought up coal and iron mines as well as other shipping lines that fed the steel business. Later, he and his son acquired plants that made tools, railroad cars, and weapons. In the United States, John D. Rockefeller built Standard Oil Company of Ohio into an empire. By gaining control of oil wells, oil refineries, and oil pipelines, he demonstrated the American petroleum industry. Dominated the American petroleum industry. In their pursuit of profit, ruthless business leaders destroyed competing companies. Then, with the competition gone, they were free to raise prices to any level. Sometimes a group of large corporations would join forces and form a cartel. an association to fix prices, set production quotas, and control markets. In Germany, a single cartel fixed the prices of 170 coal mines. An international shipping cartel in Britain and Germany and French and Dutch and Japanese shippers came close to setting freight rates on the sea lines of the world. Move towards regulation. The rise of big business and the creation of such great wealth sparked a stormy debate. Some people saw the Krupps and the Rockefellers as captains of industry and praised their vision and skill. They pointed out that capitalists invested their wealth in worldwide ventures, such as railroad buildings, and that they employed thousands of workers and added to the general prosperity of society. To others, the aggressive magnates were robber barons. Not a guy named Robert Barron. Robber barons. Any effort to destroy competition, critics argued, damaged the free enterprise system. Reformers called for laws to prevent monopolies and regulate large corporations. In the early 1900s, some governments did move against monopolies. However, the political and economic power of business leaders often hindered efforts at regulation. I'm sure that it still does to this day. Because that wasn't that long ago, really. Looking ahead, and this is the end of our time today. I hope you enjoy the weather and all that. By the late 1800s, European and American corporations were setting up factories, refineries, and other production facilities around the world. Banks, too, were involved in this global economy. They invested vast sums, the money coming from rich and small depositors, in undertakings such as building ports, railroads, and canals. The Western capital flowed into Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Western governments became increasingly involved in these areas, as they remain today, with the mining of precious metals and all that, and things we need for batteries that we have children do, and we don't pay them anything. But maybe we do, and maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before, vastly and profoundly. I hope you have a wonderful day, and enjoy the weather. Goodbye, and God bless.